Hey everyone, welcome to the Industry Show. I'm your host, Nitin Bajaj, and joining me today is Sanjoy Roy. Sanjoy, welcome on the show.
Thanks so much, Nitin. Good to see you again and delighted to be on the show.
Always a pleasure spending time with you, Sanjoy. Let's start with the big question. Who is Sanjoy?
Sanjoy is the hair. That's the brand. Everybody thinks that they know the hair, so to speak. And it's really my hair that sort of propels everything. And I grew my hair primarily because my wife had an accident and I hadn't cut my hair for a bit. And our eldest son one day came and said, "Are you planning to grow your hair?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, "If you grow your hair, you can't come to my school." And I'm like, that's it. No parent teacher day, no school day, no annual day. So I grew my hair. And as they say, the rest is history.
And you do know that you're my unofficial mentor, and this is in respect of.
Amen.
I usually keep my hair tied, but then you said, "Hey, keep it open." So here it is. So
Exactly. We're sort of twinning on that level.
it's all about the hair. So tell us what teamwork arts is, and more importantly, the thing that I am personally curious about. Why do this? You could do so many other things, right? You could be a hair model. You could have been many other people. So why teamworks?
So, Nitin, I think any of us who have long hair, we have limited opportunities in terms of what we can do. So, the arts is obviously the obvious choice. But it's really from when I was in school or in university, etc. The arts was a choice, and I used to be involved in theater. And it's where I met my wife and partner. And my father-in-law asked me, so when we decided to get married, my father-in-law asked, "And what do you do?" And I said, "I do theater." He said, "No, what's your day job?" So I said, "No, I do theater." And so he was like, "How will you support my wife?" And I'm like, "No, she's a manager in a big firm. She'll support us." So obviously that didn't go down too well. And my own dad, my own parents used to say, we introduce our eldest son as a nuclear physicist, economist, scientist. Well, what should we introduce you to as to our friends and so on and so forth? So it was very clear that one had to show that we can create value in the arts, pretty much in the same way that you create value in any other ecosystem. And that's what we set out to do when we set up Teamwork in 1989. We were primarily a television and film content making company. India just opened up its television programming, and we were running about 14 or 15 daily, weekly shows, everything from soap operas to food shows to game shows to news programs, etc. And in many ways, it was to really give employment to our colleagues in theater. So you worked through the day and then you rehearsed in the evening, kind of thing. But in 1995, we pivoted back to the arts because two of our colleagues, Manik and Sharupa, on a Saturday afternoon meeting where we used to meet all our producers and directors, came around and said, "We're brain dead. We can't do this anymore." Because in those days, if a program was successful, it ran every day, week after week, month after month, year after year. There was no season, a concept of a season that it just ran forever. So we were all of these programs running for 5 or 6 years. So no date nights and no family time, etc., because you shot till 10 o'clock at night and you started at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was just relentless. So in 1995, when they said, "We can't do this," I'm like, okay, let's go back to the arts, and forgetting for a brief nanosecond that television film in those days, you got paid or notionally paid every hour and the arts was really just an investment into a black hole in those early times. So today we do about 30 odd festivals in about 47 or 48 cities in 19 or 20 countries, and we sit at the cross section of knowledge, innovation, and the arts.
That's phenomenal. So first off, you've been a pioneer in the truest definition. And I remember the time when, I was growing up. Uh, I believe we had the privilege of getting cable TV in the early 90s when India was going through that transition where there was an explosion of content. We had no concept or notion of seasons. And it was the same thing that came on back to back every single day at the same time. And the entire nation, a billion people, were glued on to their TV screens. And it's fascinating that you got to be in that mix and define an entire generation and what we watched growing up. So that's amazing, and that's just baffling that you got to curate content for such a wide variety of audience. So, and I'm sure it was thrilling and it was challenging in the truest sense. But then also, you mentioned something that I did my doctoral thesis on South Asian immigrant entrepreneurs because the India that I brought with me was the one that you faced firsthand when we told somebody that we are going to become an entrepreneur or we are an entrepreneur. Nobody wanted to give their daughter's hand because the question was, what do you do for a living, right? How are you going to provide for her? And there was no honest answer for it. Congratulations on making that transition and being successful at it, and in turn, inspiring an entire generation as you did that. But I would love to ask you today one, what is the impact teamwork has created?
So, Nitin, when we start a festival, we don't necessarily start by saying, oh, we're going to create the biggest or the largest
Sure.
or whatever. Those are really accidents of circumstances or happenstance. And despite what Harvard Business School used to teach, that we had a 5 and a 10 and a 15-year plan to
Mhm.
get to being the biggest arts brand or the biggest festivals in the world. That's not what we set out to do. What we set out to do is really see if we could make an impact on the ground, one person, 5 people, 10 people, and it didn't really matter. But yeah, today across the world, because we are in so many different geographies, and in many ways post-COVID as well, because we're all digital and online. We've always been digital and online, but
Mhm.
the way that much of our programming has been received digitally and online has grown exponentially. So today, typically, for example, in our flagship, the Jaipur Literature Festival and the JLFs, over the years, we may have, in this last year, we've reached about 400 million engagements, 27 million views of the programs, etc. But if you look at a cumulative 18 years for the Jaipur Literature Festival, you're talking about millions of people on the ground, millions of people online, tens of thousands of writers coming together. And the same, our theater festival, for example, which has been running for 20 odd years, just working with the artists, just the artist community who've come and been part of the festival have been over 40,000. And then, of course, there's the online audience that we have that goes into many millions, and then the folks who come to see the shows. So in that sense, we made a conscious effort to reach out to arts going communities. But as part of that arts going communities, we also reach out to those communities who are economically disadvantaged or are disenfranchised, not just in India, but be it in South Africa, in South Chicago, in places like Soweto and Cape Flats and Alexandria, or in Vancouver, or any of the other states and countries that we work in, Egypt and Turkey and Switzerland and America, and UK and USA, etc. And the effort is really, can we get young people through the door? I think folks like us have failed the planet and our society, and we can see the consequences of that around us. The world has changed. So what is it that we can do to empower young people? And the best way to do that is give them considered knowledge, not just WhatsApp or Google, but give them considered knowledge. And then hopefully that triggers in them the need and the desire to bring about a change. So our focus is, can we get young people through the door? And 80 for the so at the Jaipur Literature Festival, for example, in India, 80% of our pre-COVID 500,000 people who came through the doors, and post-COVID about 350,000, because we've had to look at rescaling it in terms of numbers,
Mhm.
are below the age of 25. So that's really our focus, getting young people and allowing them that opportunity to perhaps in some ways discover the talent within and realize their full potential. Sadly, for example, in the United States, you are right now in the midst of shutting down your education
Hmm.
department. Uh, but this was already at the crossroads. In Florida, for example, you don't have a budget that allows schools to explore the arts. Now, if you don't do that, how then will you have young people or any people innovate? The arts helps you open up your mind. It helps you think out of the box. It helps you realize your full potential, and it helps you innovate. And without that, how will any society progress? Going forward, you will see the impact on STEM. You will see the impact on innovation. You will see the impact on creativity in the United States. Having said that, creativity wells up from inside. It's a calling. So you can't really put down somebody who has that creative spark in him, her, or them. But what you do is by shutting down programs, you curtail the positive influence that the arts has. And much of the work that we do across countries is this, to show that arts can and does create tangible and intangible wealth. And in doing so, opens up minds, pushes back on ignorance. And by pushing back on ignorance, it pushes back on hatred. And by pushing back on hatred, perhaps it can make an impact on less violence that we're seeing, because violence at the end of the day will consume us all and will consume the planet. And it is the only home that we know collectively. Elon Musk may build a home out in Mars, but not everybody will be able to transport themselves on his rockets there. So we still need to preserve the only home that we have for our children, their grandchildren, and future generations.
And you've always been so eloquent. You're one of the best orators that I have come across. But thank you for putting that deep topic out in such beautiful words and doing justice to it. I personally believe that STEM is still a relatively smaller slice. It should really be STEAM, including arts as part of the stream. And you're right. It's on one end we curtail by cutting access off, but also we don't nurture, we don't promote, we don't provide those avenues for generations to be able to think creatively, to not just solve problems, but to be able to optimistically look at the opportunities that exist for all spectrums of the community and society. Now, as you do this, I'm very curious to see what challenges you face. I'm sure there's multiple, but the one big challenge you would like to call out.
Challenges are complicated things. It depends on what you think is a challenge. But in most of our festivals, what the primary challenge that we face is, how do you create a safe space? How do you create a safe space where people can come and access the work that you have curated for them? How do you create a space where you can, with equal respect, present another perspective, another tradition, another history, another philosophy, another way of doing work? And how can you do it in a way that is not challenging, that doesn't bring up people's fears of having been co-opted into something that they don't know? Pushing back on ignorance is one of the biggest challenges I think that we face everywhere. That's the sort of uniform challenge. But when you present stuff in a way that works for the audiences and make sure that it is inclusive and respectful to their traditions, to their world. For example, what we do in Egypt or for Turkey or in Zimbabwe or South Africa, each of these were challenging in the sense of these were different worlds. And yet today, many of our festivals in these parts of the world are seen to be as their festivals. And how do you bring into the festival that we do their sensibilities? So I remember, for example, in Australia, when we were creating this big gala, both at the Sydney Opera House, but also for their Commonwealth Games Arts Festival closing, which I was designing and directing for the Australian government. We brought in the Aboriginal communities from Melbourne and other places. And I didn't understand when I saw the artistic director of the Sydney Opera House, the First Minister, the premiers of New South Wales, etc., crying in the audience. And I was like, that's a bit over the top reaction. And it's a beautiful show, but yeah, is it crying worthy? I wasn't entirely convinced of that. And then later, when I spoke with them, they said, we've never seen in the Sydney Opera House, in a mainstream show, a minority community like the First Nations being incorporated. Or in London, when we did a big gala at the Royal Festival Hall to bring in people with disabilities. So we had tap dancers at the back and a big orchestra and a choir. But we also had a dance company on wheelchairs performing with the
Oh,
tap dance, collaborating with them. Similarly, for example, at the Edinburgh festivals, way back in the early 2000s, I remember one of the critics, when we released the program, said to me, so Sanjoy, you're going to show us the 7 different ways in which Indians tap their feet in the name of dance. And I was so annoyed that in terms of the ignorance, I said, okay, why don't you come out to India? We'll take you to India. We'll
yeah.
travel you around. We'll show you both good and bad in terms of our dance traditions and the philosophy that goes with dance. So that when we went to the Lyceum Theatre, Edinburgh's primary theatre, and presented this work, of course, it was packed houses, but also that they understood what it is that we were doing. Or a year that we took a lot of work out into Shanghai and Beijing, and everything was sold out. And I was in the aisles and I was looking at everybody watching the show on their mobile phones and recording or streaming it. And I was
Yeah.
so annoyed. So I was kept smacking people and saying,
Yes.
put your phones off or whatever. Not that they were understanding what I was saying, but I was being very physical. And then at interval, all of these people went out and a new lot of people came in. And
Wow.
then I realized what they were doing is because they didn't get tickets, they were streaming to their
Mm.
relatives or their family was standing outside. And then in the second half, those people came in and watched it. You get so many different experiences and so many different truths and ways of doing things that it enriches you in any country. Recently, we're doing something in the Middle East, and we are consulting for Saudi Arabia, and we're looking at a new project in Malaysia. It's really a journey of discovery.
Mhm.
And in every way, that's a journey of discovery for us as well. It's not just that we land as a spaceship and we present something and we take off. It's about that discovery. It's about the learning. It's about shared values. It's about ideas that have traveled from the East across the Arabias into the Levant and then made its way into the West, as Josephine Quinn says, how the world made the West. And you see this come alive through built heritage, through tradition, through the arts, etc. That's the most exciting part.
That's so amazing. And you almost segued into the next question I have for you is with challenges or on the flip side of challenges come opportunities. And I would love for you to talk about the one most exciting opportunity that you see ahead of you.
So, Nitin, technology today is here to stay, and technology changes every day, every week, every hour. There's some development somewhere which impacts the way that you look at health, the way that you're looking at the economy, the way that we look at how to make life easier or more difficult or stressful. I think that's a great opportunity and a challenge. And like most challenges, you have to see how the possibilities are good for as many people as possible.
Mhm.
Now, when you take a new innovation, when insulin was invented by its inventors, they realized at that point of time that, of course, they could make a lot of money off the patent, but they agreed that the patent would be just $1 because they wanted this to impact as many people around the world. Of course, what pharmaceutical companies have done with that is a different story. But even here, if technology and AI and everything that AI is going to bring, if it's going to be used, or if it can be used for the larger good, I'm not saying greater good, but I'm saying the larger good, meaning impacting as many different people in positive ways, then the impact of what it will do, which is you will change the way jobs are done, some people will have to redefine their jobs, lose their jobs, economies will be impacted. Then there's a positive lining in there.
Right.
And I think all of us have to nudge the creators of this, whether it's Matt Lagoon or Hinton, of course, has taken a step back and said, I think it's going to be an evil beast. But Matt Lagoon said he thinks it's at the threshold of the future. And we have to nudge them to ensure that the future is not for A person or B person, but it's for as many people. And the future is not just how do you use this for bad, because that's the easy part of it. Our default setting seems to be cruel, be bad, do dangerous things to other people, or be selfish. Selfish is not necessarily a negative
True.
as long as you're looking at it in a much larger context.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, how do you nudge people to do good?
Mm-hmm.
How do you nudge people to love? And these are all much more difficult than, as I said, default settings of hate and violence and othering people, etc. So I think that's the big challenge in the future. And mankind we've lasted so many millions of years, despite the odds from the beginning of time when we were fish or catfish living both on land and sea, and now the evolution as we see ourselves today. But the point is that we as human beings have been also very rapidly heading towards extinction, either self-made because of the way we're treating the planet, or through war and through the kinds of weapons that we've created. So we need to be very conscious going forward.
As we talk about these opportunities and the one that you're working on, I'd love to pause and reflect and ask you to share two moments from your life, personal and professional, one in which things did not work out as you had expected, and there was failure, there were maybe lessons that came out of that, and another where things exceeded your own expectations and were a success beyond your imagination.
For me personally, when something doesn't work, it becomes an opportunity to learn.
Mhm.
And very early enough, very first television show, we did something. It was a game show. We were shooting the first 4 episodes, which was the pilot episodes, and we had to deliver it on X day. And the shooting in the studio didn't go well. Our camera director wasn't able to crack the lighting, as a result of which, when the edit happened, we realized everything was really dark and wasn't quite working. And I flew out to Bombay to the studio, to ZTV, to hand them over the tape. And that was the day the Bombay riots broke.
Mm.
And I was staying with Shah Rukh, and Shah Rukh drove me to the studios, and we were seeing all of these burnt out shells of houses, and the streets were in disarray, and there was fires burning all over the place. But irrespective, I got to ZTV at the time that we were supposed to, and they were so overwhelmed at the fact that despite everything, I was able to get to them.
Mhm.
That the fact that what we'd shot was unusable didn't really matter.
Hmm.
And we sat down together and discussed what needed to be changed, and we did. And that show went out to be one of their most successful shows, and the first game show on Indian television. And it gave us also that understanding of what else do you need to do to make something Right. And the lesson that came through is that as long as your intent is positive or your intent is true, truth itself is a problematic word, but and you're not covering it up, or you're accepting what may have happened or may have gone wrong. I think everybody then falls into line on that. That's the learning from there. Nitin, success is always the biggest challenge. When you fail at something, that's easy. You reboot, or you learn, or you don't learn, or you move on, or whatever. But success is the biggest challenge. And in many ways, much of what we've done or been able to achieve has been seen to be successful. And you could go into the definitions of success separately. But if you look at the Jaipur Literature Festival, the world's largest festivals, but it did. And today, millions of people pour in through our doors, both online and on ground. And that in many ways challenges you, because how do you then make sure that you're creating a better experience for those people each time? How do you better yourself? And what's the learning? How do you use technology? How do you use manpower? How do you motivate people? How do you create a better experience? And in much of that, what you also have to understand and do is that the success may be attributed to A person or B person, but that's not how success works.
True.
Success really is a collective coming together of many forces, some invisible, some visible, some conscious, some unconscious. And you always have to ensure that you're aware of the way that works, and then not necessarily think that, oh, this has been done primarily because of A or B, C person. No, you have to ensure that you have a sense of reality and you do not place yourself in the center of that success, but you allow that success to become a joint co-owned experience, both by those who are coming in from outside as well as those who are making it possible. And that's really, in many ways, the most difficult thing. Nitin, when you're at the zenith of your success, say the big bands like ABBA or the Beatles, etc., trying to keep that success together and trying to understand that you can ride it in a way, but it's collective action becomes the big challenge. And that's when most things fall apart, when you're at that zenith, at that point, because then it becomes too big for you for an individual. So you have to be very conscious of that.
As I say that, and I've known you to be a very humble person, you have created these magical experiences. You've created these successful entities or just these factions of communities that you have brought together for decades now. Uh, I would be remiss to not acknowledge that you have that magic, you have that Midas touch. And as much as you say that it's not about person A or B, kudos to you for recognizing that and recognizing what people are hurting for and what people are needing, what an entire generation is hungry for and craving for, and to be able to bring those experiences together for us, whether it's JLF or many of these experiences that you have mentioned. So, again, many congratulations to you and kudos to you for not just achieving success and creating that impact, but also staying humble and being grounded in saying that it's not about you, it's not about a person, it's about where is that need, where is that gap, what is it that millions of people wanting to need, and then bringing that experience together in this magical setting that you create. So, really appreciate you for just being you and doing what you do.
Thanks, Nitin. But as I said, it's not necessarily me, it's circumstances that have shaped me. And I think if you meditate, as I do every
Mhm.
morning, you understand that you are but a microcosm in a larger connect. And I think if we understand that, and while we're in the center of everything, also realize that we are in the center of everything that we know.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, whenever there's a Twitter war, for example, I used to tell my colleagues, I said, it's okay. It's on Twitter. It's a universe which is separate. So you have to be very conscious about where you are in the scheme of things.
True.
And all you need to do to understand that is on a moonless night, step out into the night sky and look up. And pretty much like your backdrop as it appears here could be gold splattered solar system with thousands of planets and stars and other beings maybe, etc. So who are you in that context? And in that context, can we claim to know everything about everything?
Mm-hmm.
No, we can't. And our understanding of the world sort of changes from when you're a baby to when you're older. And it's that understanding, and for the lack of a better word, what we say wisdom, that wisdom you have to wear lightly,
Mm-hmm.
because wisdom is not what you have found. Wisdom is an aggregation of everybody, the billions of people who've gone before you and have contributed to that wisdom that you have inherited. And in inheriting it, you have to understand that you have to inherit it with humility and empathy and understanding and respect.
Said like a true wise man with a strong head on someone's shoulders. And I would expect nothing
Nitin,
less.
it's about the long hair, right? You and me, long hair.
Here's the difference. We both have the long hair, but you have way more wisdom than, as I say, when I grow up, I would love to be a small percentage of who you are. So, again, thank you for being you. Now,
Thank you.
I would love to hear, as much as I know you and you enjoy doing what you do, and this is your lifeblood and passion, I'd love for you to share what do you do to kick back and disengage from your quote unquote or air quotes profession.
I read. I love reading. I don't watch television. I don't
Mhm.
own a television. Oh, we don't have a television in our
Yeah.
room. I love reading. So that's where all of this knowledge that you're talking about, or wisdom, that's where it comes from. I enjoy watching stuff. I enjoy traveling. It's always interesting meeting people
Mhm.
because from everybody you learn something over every espresso martini,
Yes.
having a conversation wherever we do. You're always finding a speck of truth because there is truth in everybody. So that's, yeah, people watching, reading. These are my two default settings.
I think that comes with, except the reading, I'm more of a listener. I listen to books than reading. But I think the other perspectives that you shared, the people watching, I think it comes with the hair. And with jokes aside, I'd love for you to share a book that you've really enjoyed and learned from, and you would recommend to our audience.
Oh, so many. As I said, The World Made the West, Josephine Quinn,
Mhm.
absolutely brilliant book.
Mhm.
But presently, for anybody who's interested in the rise and fall of the southern dynasties in India, Anirudh Kanisetti's The Lords of the Deccan, absolutely brilliant. Or if you wanted to read about the Mughals and really understand them, Ira Mukhoti's Akbar the Great,
Mhm.
amazing amount of information, which is contrary to how we see it today or what we read about today. Ikigai, again, such an interesting response to a very difficult world.
Mhm.
Because I read 6 books or 7 books at the same time, so I don't necessarily go beginning till end, but it depends on how I read it.
Mhm.
Biographies. I was reading David Hare's
Mhm.
great theater director's writer's biography. And when you read a biography, if you know the work of the person,
Right.
it really puts it into context
Mhm.
and allows you to understand the person behind. And that's again so exciting, so interesting to read. Martin Buckner's The History of World Literature. I think the history of the written word is the title of the book. Simon Sebag Montefiore's Jerusalem. As we know, Jerusalem today is at the center, continues to be the center of a 3,000-year storm. And every president wants to solve the problem, the eternal problem of Jerusalem. But you need to read the book to understand why there can't be a solution in the way that we are trying to find a solution, why they can't necessarily be a two-state solution that's being propagated, why it has to come up with a different kind of coexistence, which includes love and respect and equality, which obviously Israel doesn't understand, but that's a different thing. So these are some key books of the moment that I think people should engage with.
Thank you for sharing those recommendations. This brings us to my favorite part of the show. We call it the one line life lessons. That wisdom, that hustle, that being in that center of that moment, of that generation, of that need, and recognizing where we need to push along, where we need to stay humble, stay grounded, all of that that brings together. We love to encapsulate that as a one line life lesson. And I would love for you to share your one line life lessons with us.
My only life lesson perhaps is you have to center yourself. And to do that, you can look at meditating, which is what I do, even if it's a few minutes in the day, and filling yourself with positive energy so that you can then give off your energy to people who need it. And yeah, that's roughly it. And try and be respectful and empathetic. Try and be as kind as you can. And as I said, our default settings tend to be, it's easier for us to be harsh or angry or to hate. It's much more difficult to love. And it is something that takes time to understand. Now I understand when my response is harsh, so I'm able to pull back. Sometimes the damage is done before I pull back. But it's something that I try and operate out of a space of love and respect. Very difficult. And therefore, I need to meditate to be able to look at the larger benefits of love and respect.
So well said. One thing I've learned from meditating, it's a journey, it's a path and a course we set ourselves on. And with each moment, with each interaction, with each transaction, with each relationship, we strive to be our best version and have the best ability for ourselves to be able to respond to that situation. Sanjoy, thanks so much